And it's just, it really resonates with
And
people.
Tony Shalhoub, you know, of course, I mean, I think that Tony Shalhoub and Stanley Tucci, that relationship is so wonderful. And then Tony ended up having his beautiful, huge career in The Monk, and where he plays that character, that he does that strange, introverted person. Is nobody does it better than him. The last scene of the film that is very touching, you know, when the two brothers prepared the omelette, the producer didn't want it because he thought it was too ambiguous, and either there would be a reconciliation that was much more declared, or a fight and then a separation. And they fought a lot to keep it. And I think it's one of the greatest scenes of the films, you know, that moment where family goes on, and of course family always fight, but it's family.
You were talking before about loving food, and the film certainly resonates with that. So was food very important in your family when you were growing up?
Well, you know, I'm half Italian and half Swedish, so of course the Italian family food was more important because, you know, there are countries like Italy or France which biggest industry is the food industry. I mean, Italian food is everywhere around the world. Can you imagine the amount of Parmigiano cheese that has to be produced you can find it everywhere in the world, or olive oil, or these basic ingredients. So, of course, in Italy there is a culture of food. So it's not so much to eat a lot, but is to eat well. You know, if you don't have the right Parmigiano, or if you have the wrong tomato, people are very refined in their taste, and they can tell the difference. How can I compare? It's a little bit like maybe wine connoisseur, you know, who could tell a bad wine from a good wine. In Italy, so part of the culture, the food, everybody can tell a good mozzarella from a bad mozzarella, you know? You know, so it's very much part of the culture of Italian. And then, you know, of course, my mom was Swedish. And in Sweden there is very good food. I love Swedish food, but they don't have the same tradition, long tradition. A part of their culture is not food. But we ate, but we didn't eat much. You know, it wasn't the banquets. We ate and ate and ate. Not so much. Also, my mom was an actress, so she had to stay thin. So.
And I mean, they were also, you know, you talked about Italy and this great love of food. Of course, like I was talking to Martin before, how this restaurant is just really ahead of its time. I mean, nowadays people would be blogging about this authentic Italian restaurant that serves the real thing. At that time, of course, there was sort of Italian food and Italian American food.
Yes, when I came to America in the late 70s, there was Italian-American food, and I was totally scandalized at spaghetti and meatballs. I would never eat them, you know.
Still?
I ate them once, but I can't like them because, you know, we're so inculcated with, you know, the meatballs. It could be that it's also a dish from the South. That I don't know. It could be a regional dish. Of a small village, and when he came to America, a lot of people from that village came, and that tradition exploded. But in Italy, we don't have spaghetti and meatballs otherwise. Now we're associating it with Italian-American food. And you know, I think that the greatest difference when I first came was the ingredients. Now they're here. When I remember flying to New York, hiding, because I was afraid of the beagles at the airport, hiding Parmigiano Reggiano, because there was a local Parmigiano, but it was done in America, who didn't have at all the taste of the Parmigiano in Italy, which we love, the Parmigiano Reggiano, Grana, you know, there's two. Another thing that happened, so now everything is here. Another thing that was very interesting that happened in Italy, in this long life that I lived, is that when the European Union, you know, now Europe is like a little bit the United States. It has agreements. We have one US euro. We have one monetary currency, and countries were given. You know, Spain was going to do the olive oil, and somebody else was going to do the strawberries, and that people screamed, how all the local varieties were going to be missed, all this monoculture were going to come to Europe. First, they forbade all the genetically modified food in Europe. There is an enormous difference with America. It's incredible. In America, corn, rice, it's 80 to 90% genetically modified. It came in very fast in our country without us knowing, because they obtained the right not to declare it on the label, so we never know if we eat genetically modified food or not. In Europe it was outlawed. Just in very rare situations, I think there was a fungus to a potato, so they accepted a genetically modified potato to remedy to that illness. So in very, very, very specific situations. But still, country were given rules that they didn't have before. And it was terrible for us, because we would drive 20, 30 miles to get the potato that only grows there, because then you change and you go to another terrain which is closer to the sea, and the potato will have another taste. So we were used to that kind of very different varieties. But this has remained in Italy, and it actually exploded. It was very interesting. With all that we were afraid of only having the olive oil for Andalusia in Spain, instead now there are small productions everywhere in Europe, and the spaghetti that I always looked for in America was the De Cecco brand, which is considered a very good brand in America. But now Italians, they might buy De Cecco, but they buy the local pasta that are produced by local farms with local grain. This has become the new fashion. So what we have now in America is very good qualities, but we don't have the small productions from farm. They continued. The tradition of food is so strong that it's very hard to eradicate it. I think it'll stay, and people are very attached to their local tastes.
And food is obviously still very important to you.
It is important to me in the sense of health. It's not important to me to eat a lot, but it is important to me, sometimes...
It's maybe an American thing to associate loving to eat with gorging oneself.
Yeah, no, but I think lately there is a resurgence in America of interest in food, with, especially in California. So imagine the culture of California, but 1,000 years of it, and in Italy that's what it is. It's going to be very difficult. Or France. There are certain countries, France, Italy, Spain, we're blessed with an incredible weather. So we have a production that is very, very long. We might have 2 or 3 months a year where there is no production of food. So yes, it's very much part of our culture. I can't imagine, what can I compare it to America? Something that you say, if I don't have that, then it's not America. I don't know, 4th of July. I don't know, because you are such a baseball, exactly, but it is as profound. It's really taking something, but also America has so many different culture. There's the melting pot and all this, but those are things that have been so long in the tradition of Italy. Even McDonald's is modified in Europe. First of all, the French, they call it McDo to begin with. They changed it, they made it abbreviation to McDo. They serve wine. And they serve much more vegetables, because people can't eat a hamburger only. They say, well, where's the vegetables? So they have to adapt it. Even somebody like McDonald's has to adapt to the local culture to be successful.
Sure. All right, one last thing. We'll open up to the audience, so if you're thinking of a couple of good questions. This event, of course, is part of our digital cinema fundraising campaign. And since your life kind of, bridges this where, with your parents who were involved in the classic celluloid cinema, and now you're involved in purely digital projects like the wonderful Green Porno shorts. And I was wondering if you could say anything about this enormous transition from the classic film technology to this new technology.
Well, the biggest transformation is, of course, the technical transformation. A cinematographer who is an artist in his own right and knows which film to select and which lights to make with that film, all of a sudden he doesn't have the film available to him, so he has to relearn his skills and learn how to use digitally, but also put the artistry. Everybody is able to take a photo, even a photo with film or digital, but of course if you have Richard Avedon or Storaro, they have an eye that we don't have, and they are able to create and know how to use film and light in a way that we won't be able to. So now there is a whole generation that has to learn the digital. And that goes from cinematographer, editors who are, we're used to cutting and pasting the film. Now they have to use the computer, and I find it very difficult even just to use my iPad, So that's very difficult. And there is a whole new generation of older people who have a great experience, but it's very difficult to learn the new technologies. So this is a crisis. You have young people who have not edited or lit many films who are very familiar with the new technology, and an old generation who is very experienced but doesn't know the new technologies. And some of the things, they go obsolete. I mean, you cannot find certain films anymore because emulsion is not, it's out of the market. So, the other great revolution is the distribution and the monetization, how to make money in the web. That is a big crisis. The distribution can be very wide. The web is an international distribution. Before, when you do a film, for example, when we did Big Night, is an American film, and then when you take it to a festival, Sundance or the Cannes Film Festival, the Berlin Film Festival, and those are marketplace where you present it to the press, but also you present it to buyers, and international buyers would buy it. So then you sell the film, and that's how you recuperate your costs. But nowadays, in the internet, a film comes out, is put in the internet, and it goes internationally. So there is no way to get the money back, nor no way to sell tickets, because a lot of people, pirating has become enormous. So this has been a tremendous, Hollywood films, 50% of the people see Hollywood films pirated, 50%. Can you imagine the loss of revenue? So in one hand, the internet allows you to reach countries that we've never reached before, in Africa, in Asia, countries that may not have cinemas, but now they can see things if they have a computer in the village and all that. But on the other hand, it has not created a business model where this money can go back to whoever creates films. So we are in a moment of transition, and quite difficult.
Yeah, no, we're in the midst of that right here. We're having to buy expensive new projectors or not be able to show films anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is also another thing, because you're doing retrospective and showing old films. This is another question that museums have. The digital does not last even less than films. So you have to, if you're a museum and you have a collection of old film, all of a sudden you might restore them digitally. That costs less than restoring film. But you have to have a budget to every 5 years transfer the files, because otherwise they deteriorate. Films, once they are restored, they have a lifespan quite long if you keep them refrigerated, or at least 20 years. Right? So all this is a great revolution. And for you too, you have to have all new technologies. And now they're going to even beam film later in a few years.
So they say.
Yeah. Some festivals have done it recently. It worked so-so. I had Peter Scarlett was the director of the Tribeca Film Festival, who's now director of the Abu Dhabi Film Festival. And they just beamed the film that he selected for his festival in Abu Dhabi. They did not send physically the film, anymore. It was just beamed, and he would beam it to the audience. And he said they did have some glitches, but it worked. So you don't have to have courier and send back things, and things get lost. And also the great fear of piracy, because piracy is in the transfer. When they bring you the film here, the truck driver is stopped, however, the many people in between, and that's where piracy happens.
Yeah. All right, so we have time for a few questions, then we're all going to go inside. I'm sure people, like I said, are hungry. Right here.
I was just, in the dinner scene in the movie, I was just thinking about what went on behind that. Was there a chef in the kitchen? Did Tony Shalhoub do all the cooking? How did you shoot it? Because, I mean, I was full at the end of watching it,
What?
so I can imagine shooting it, and how did you set that all up?
We did have a chef who has Coco Pazzo, he used to have Coco Pazzo, he now has Centolire, Pino, I forgot his name, Pino, I don't remember. Yes, Pino Luongo, exactly. Pino Luongo was the chef who did the cooking, but the timpano, which is, I know it is in Italian as timballo, so I think that because it was really in Stanley Tucci's family, but I think sometimes words get deformed, or when they go from Italy and they arrive to America and they remember by 2 or 3 generations. So I know that dish as timballo, but he knew it from his grandmother to be timpano. And timpano is what you have in your ears, the 3 little, and I have to say, it can't be. In Italian it means it's 3 little bones that you can hear. But we kept the name because he couldn't change it, because it would be like betraying his grandmother. And Pino Luongo did all the cooking. And Stanley went and learned how to flip because you had to have all the gestures. So he did go with Tony Shalhoub to Pino Luongo's kitchen and learned. So at least the gestuality was authentic. We couldn't eat it though, because to shoot that big banquet, it took maybe 3 or I don't know, maybe a week or 10 days. So everything was painted, to shine. And so there were signs everywhere, do not eat. And when we had a dish, where we had the good, the food that looked good, but we couldn't eat, they would put 3 pieces of carrots, and they would say, if in the scene you put something, just eat this. So we had just that little pieces. Everything else was poisoned with conserved paint, whatever it was that they put there.
Everybody's disillusioned now. Somebody else? Okay, please speak up.
I've seen David Lynch speak on his transcendental meditation, and he opened a discussion talking at NYU about film and digital, and where he just recommended that digital was so important, where NYU students who were all film, this was just 3 years ago, they didn't even want to see the change coming. But he said the thing about the digital, it gave so many people opportunity to make things. And you got people who could never afford to do anything on film, who were artists who could really make wonderful things. So the digital has,
Oh yes, no, it has many advantages. Even technically is simpler. If you take a photo, you immediately see if you have the shot you needed or not. I just did a film last week at my home, and we could play it back, every take to see if we had it or not. So, of course, it's so much. I find it difficult for me to learn computer, but so I find it even harder I don't even know how to put the film in the camera, and all these wheels. So for me, don't count on me on that. But of course, digital has an enormous advantages. But it's the distribution of digital that it is, everybody can make a film and they can put it in YouTube, and you can get, 200 million people watch it. But there is no mechanism to get the money back to the artist so that he can make his second film. So you have a lot of film, I always say financed by grandmothers, who have nowadays become the biggest producers, who give money to mamas and grandmom, to give money to their young people in the family who wish to be filmmakers, and they make their first film, and sometimes they're very successful, but there is not a mechanism to bring the money back, and that's been very difficult and frustrating.
Back there? Yeah.
How much
Yeah.
did you stick to the script and how much was improvised? Because it seems so natural.
The question was how much was
Well, I
stuck
think
to the script.
yeah, because it was pretty much scripted, everything. I think because it was written by Stanley Tucci, his cousin was not an actor, and Campbell Scott. But Campbell Scott and Stanley Tucci directed it, acted in it, and co-wrote it with Stanley's cousin. I think the words were very, you know, they've tried out this sentence that way. They were very, the word fit perfectly well in their mouth, so they felt very improvised. But no, it was scripted.
Okay, so there's food inside, so we'll have time for one more question, and then we're going to go in all the way in the back, and if people can't hear you, I'll repeat the question.
You mentioned how digital technology affords I guess, easier ways to make film. But do you also see a development in creative production, the creative aspect of film, other than the digital facility?
If I see digital as being creative, on my end, I can only tell that I make short films for the digital, for Sundance Digital distribution, and short films didn't have a distribution until the digital world came, and YouTube, which only started about 7 years ago, seems to have created already a tradition that people like to see 2 or 3 minutes film, and cinema don't show 2 or 3 minutes film, television don't show 2 or 3 minutes film. The shortest film you can get is advertisement, but then some of them are very artistic, but of course we don't look at it as artistic because it has a message to sell you. The shortest film you can make for television is half an hour, minus the minutes that were dedicated to the advertisement, so it's about 22 or 23 minutes, the half an hour or the hour, and then the film that is shown in a theater has to be minimum of an hour and 20 minutes, otherwise distributors don't like it. So digital at least broke this, and that's liberating because it was almost like telling writers, you could write a book, but it has to be 30 pages, 60 pages, or 90 pages, you know. So now there is that freedom. My father was a director, Roberto Rossellini, and he was asked once to give a master class, and he came with his camera because he invented a remote zoom. So he came with a camera and to show this, and the student came and all went around the camera to look at it with great fascination, and he got really angry, and he said, you know, if a writer comes in with a pen or a typewriter, would you all rush to the pen and the typewriter? Technology is technology. What counts is what is in your head. So is the digital world going to change? Yes, to a certain extent it will, because it will have different distribution, you'll talk to a different audience, you can talk back and forth, so there might be a response that you can create. But at the end is the talent, is the brain. It isn't a piece of machine that gives you a good story.
All right, well, on that note, that wonderful note, I want to thank you all.
Thank you. I apologize for coming late.
Don't worry about it. Now, I'm sure everybody's got a good appetite. We shouldn't let the food get cold. So we're going to go inside, and we'll all be in there. So enjoy the food, and we'll see you in a few minutes.